there was a fake cell phone that
I knew the
put
core of the
into
sun would be
the
hot, but this is
block,
ridiculous.
as well as several wires that didn't go anywhere. On top of that, there were several warnings written on the collar itself that said things like, if you cut the wrong wire, it will cause an early detonation. If you try to remove it this way, that will cause a detonation. And seemed to be a way of giving red herrings to whatever police officer would try to remove the device. It was an otherwise simple mechanism that was made overly complicated to throw off investigators. Kind of like this entire case. Another point to mention is that in order to keep the bomb collar intact during the investigation, the police decided to remove Brian's head during his autopsy. As you can imagine, this decision was highly contested by the family, but since the bomb collar was the only thing the police had to work with, they decided that keeping it intact was paramount. See, at this time, the FBI began building a profile and putting out to the public that whoever's doing this isn't just in it for the money. There's easier ways to steal $250,000. They're partially in it for the game of it all. Because think about it, supposedly just kidnapping a random guy, throwing this collar on him, and then doing things like the fake instructions or the ridiculously long series of notes to give to the bank teller and the entire scavenger hunt of the crime itself. It seems that whatever was going on here was more than just a bank robbery. However, it would get far more complicated than anyone expected very soon. On September the 20th, 3 weeks after Brian's death, the Erie police receive a phone call. The phone call is from a man named Bill Rothstein, who says he has a dead body in his freezer. Bill says that the body is of a man named James Roden. However, Bill says that he did not kill James Roden, and that the killer was a woman named Marjorie Deal Armstrong. Marjorie is one of the most important players in this entire case, and for good reason.
Cool.
See, Marjorie has a history of legal trouble in Erie, Pennsylvania. In 1984, she was the focus of the most famous murder case in Erie's history, up until this murder case. In 1984, Marjorie murdered her boyfriend by shooting him in the chest 6 times while he was asleep on the couch. It was a whole legal trial because Marjorie said that she was being abused by this boyfriend, and that the reason she killed him while he was asleep is because she felt it was the only time she'd be safe from him. And after a very messy and public trial, Marjorie was released. 8 years later, in 1992, Marjorie's at the time husband came to the hospital for a brain hemorrhage. He was unresponsive, but according to Marjorie, he had hit his head falling into the coffee table. Her husband died while at the hospital, and Marjorie sued the hospital for malpractice and won. However, given her past history of shooting the guy to death, as well as her current endeavors, several people think maybe her husband didn't die from just falling into the coffee table. There was also apparently a boyfriend somewhere in there who she dated for a while, who took his own life.
Why did that happen?
Fuck. So back in this timeline, Bill calls the police and says that Marjorie murdered James Roden, and the body is now stuffed in Bill's freezer. Bill says that Marjorie had murdered James over a money dispute and had Bill get rid of the gun. Bill, being afraid of Marjorie and knowing how manipulative she can be, decided to help her get rid of the evidence and store the body. However, it was after Marjorie asked him to grind up the body of James Roden that Bill couldn't do it and decided to call the police. So why does any of this relate to our Brian Wells case? What does any of this have to do with a bank heist on August the 28th? Well, the address that Bill lived at, where James Roden's body was located, was 8645 Peach Street, effectively the front yard of the abandoned radio tower. Whenever Bill calls the police, he tells them to arrest Marjorie, who is currently living at Bill's house. So the police go to get the body, they arrest Marjorie, and they go through both of their houses, and both of them were compulsive hoarders. Not only did they have clutter and just various things to such a degree that the police weren't able to find the floor as they were walking through the house, but Marjorie here also had 400 pounds of butter and 700 pounds of cheese, all of which were completely rotted. The officers who arrested Marjorie said that the most distinct memory of the entire event was A, how loud she was, and B, how stinky she was. The entire house was covered in dog poop and rotten food, and she smelled like both of those things. And before you're like, wow, Wendigoon, that's really mean to make fun of someone who's in poverty. For one, Marjorie was not in poverty, because if you'll remember, she won a ton of money from her dead husband's malpractice suit. The specific amount seems to be private, but she bought a ton of expensive things and continuously told people that she was rich. And two, Marjorie is really, really annoying. She would never stop talking. She would constantly yell and berate people around her, even people who were trying to help her, like reporters and her own attorney. A few doctors diagnosed her with things like bipolar disorder, but other doctors just said she had a narcissistic personality disorder. The FBI agents who would interrogate her over the
Xbox Cycle's dead, unless I get like literally the greatest launch of all time.
Expletives at them, tell them to kill themselves, that she hated them, and then one of them would compliment her, be like, your hair looks lovely today, and she just stopped immediately. In that 1984 case, whenever she murdered...
That's fucking hilarious, actually.
Her own defense attorney said that she should have never went to trial, because if she goes to trial, she can get off for some level of mental incompetency or being battered or what have you, and said that she should instead be put into an institution where she can be locked away forever. She is dangerous and smart, and that if she is allowed to go free, this will happen again. Which, if your own attorney's saying that, that's pretty bad. So Bill Rothstein calls the police.
Can this 2x?
Freezer that Marjorie did it. The police already know who Marjorie is. So they go to arrest her, and they get James's body out and begin sifting through the house. Right after Bill made that phone call, he apparently attempted to take his own life. A lot of sources say that he only wrote the note and then never made any physical attempts to do it. But in the Netflix documentary, there's a scene where the police are walking through his house and ask what the bag of blood with a razor blade in it is, and he says that that's his. And this point's never refuted, so I imagine the police tested it, and it turns out that that was his blood. So it seems there was some kind of physical attempt made. Bill hurriedly wrote a note after he called the police, assuming that he would have finished the deed by the time the police got there. In the note, he says, "The body in the freezer in the garage is Jim Roden. I did not kill him nor participate in his death. My apologies to those who cared for or about me.
Yay.
I'm sorry that I let them down. I am sorry to
Yay.
However, the most interesting part is what he wrote at the beginning of this note that says, this has nothing to do with the Wells case. Okay, so, picture this. You're an investigator. You get a call that there is a dead body at this location directly in the front yard of the radio tower, right where the big mystery location of the bomb collar bank robbery. And officially, there's no connection because James Roden, come to find out in the autopsy, was killed 3 weeks before the day Brian Wells was killed. So seemingly, it's an unrelated incident. I mean, obviously they're going to investigate it. The hard evidence is that it's just coincidence the two were located so close to each other. And then the guy who assisted in moving the body of James Roden writes in his note, this has nothing to do with Brian Wells. So at this point, the FBI has 3 bodies that seemingly have no relation to each other, except for the guy who said that one of them is definitely not related, so definitely don't look into it, and whenever he's asked about it, he says he has no idea what they're talking about. I can't profess to know exactly how the FBI was feeling at the time, but if I had to guess, it was probably something like... Because it seems like while they've been investigating for the past month,
this is pretty good.
I don't know. That there's been no evidence of.
Square carrot squiggle. I forgot to do the left tap.
But now it seems that their best leads are Bill Rothstein
and Square carrot squiggle
Armstrong. So right now,
Fuck.
let's talk about Bill Rothstein.
Oh my goodness.
Bill Rothstein, like Marjorie, was also a very
No!
good person. Before
No!
Bill was the kind of guy who always felt like he was the smartest person in the room. He would constantly use
it's over.
words and always talk down to people.
Second place is over. I'm so
A lot
sad.
of the interviews
Really?
he would randomly switch into speaking French.
That's so dumb.